You're listening to the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week I've got Adam Parr. Adam has been with the Minnesota United Football Club, at least the last time we had a conversation on the podcast episode, 2 years ago. Now, well, he's with Charlotte Football Club, Charlotte FC, brand new expansion team in the Carolinas, and he helped build it up from the ground on up, right from scratch. We're going to find out what was involved with that, all the moving parts, and how he keeps juggling all these balls in the air. And they ended up pretty well at the end of the season, so we'll find out what his winning success was. Be sure to click on subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder, and away we go. Well, Adam, this is great having you back on to Zealous, but the last time you were on, you were up in the Great White North in Minnesota with Minnesota United FC, and you were just getting ready to take on a new role in a warmer climate in Charlotte, and you just finished your first season with the Charlotte Football Club. First, welcome, and then how was it transferring from Minnesota to Charlotte, North Carolina?
Hello, thank you, Rocky. I appreciate you having me back. Yeah, it's been quite an eventful year for in a lot of ways. And like you said, last time we spoke, I don't even know if I was able to say what the team was that I was negotiating with at the time, but I was about a week to 10 days before I was getting ready to drive down here. So it's been eventful, but it's been great. It's been full of ups and downs on the field and with the club, but like all in good ways. But I think, from the beginning of the year when I basically moved down here first week of January to be here for 2 weeks before preseason started, from that day, it was basically just full steam ahead, from the jump, because for those people who don't follow Major League Soccer, we're a brand new team this year. We're an expansion team this year. So, there was nothing existing beforehand. So it was all new staff, players, basically the only people that had been around for the most part were front office, who had been kind of building this thing over a couple of years. So when we all got down here as a staff, hey, we got to figure out what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we're putting into place, day one in preseason starting in 2 weeks. And so that was quite a hefty task, but I think we did a pretty good job for the most part, and then the hardest thing I think at the beginning was just a lot of us staff wise, like we'd never worked together before, so it's kind of all the dynamics that you think of as far as people that you work with that you've known for years, and kind of how certain policies, procedures, like what flows through who and what workflow and all this sort of stuff. All of those things had to be figured out, to start. And then you start the season basically for preseason, you're gone on the road for 6 to 7 weeks. So you're living out of hotels and stuff. So it's not like you're actually in the space that you're working out of on a daily basis. So it can be difficult to kind of work on those things from the beginning, but it was a challenge that I was excited about, because one of the things that my boss, who kind of brought me here when I was speaking to him on the phone, we were just talking about it, saying, this is one of those kind of maybe once in a lifetime opportunities where you get to be part of an expansion team and really build something, instead of existing club or team culture, staff, front office, all this other stuff. Like, you get to kind of be there from the beginning and kind of help it grow. And so that was something that was kind of too good of an opportunity for me to pass up. And I decided to come on down here. And luckily, the staff, like as far as on the medical side, like all of our athletic trainers, and then myself and my boss, who's our director of performance and sports science, kind of oversees health and performance. Everyone is fantastic, like people first. And so that really helps. We all get along very, very well. And I think it enabled us to really bond real quickly and kind of just roll our sleeves up and say, let's get to work. And I was lucky that actually one of the athletic trainers that I'd worked at in Minnesota with, he actually came down here as well. And so there was a person there that I had some familiarity with, and it was a really, really kind of good experience for us both to have someone we could lean on, but coming down and just kind of starting from the beginning was eye-opening. And it was an interesting experience, because none of us had really met the coach. Like, some of us had talked to the coaches and whatnot, but it was meeting them first off. And, they were the head coach that we had at the beginning of the year. It was definitely he and his head fitness coach, who kind of he saw as overseeing a lot of things. had very different ideas of physical development than the rest of us did. And so it was kind of not necessarily power dynamics, but just more so trying to adjust and figuring out, okay, how are we going to make this work and achieve the things that we know to be the things that we should be doing as far as strengthening, power, injury prevention, and then not to mention the fitness on the field and everything. And so it was a different experience for me, kind of being exposed to people who didn't necessarily value a lot of the same things on the physical performance side, but then having conversations and trying to figure out, okay, what do you value? What do you look at? How can we marry the two? Try and build buy-in. For me, when I first came down here, my primary role was kind of overseeing a lot of the strength programming, and then also a lot of the sports science side. So all of the GPS and the testing and everything like that. A lot of the data I was managing and overseeing and analyzing and reporting. And those were two things that the head coach and his head fitness coach were, just not that interested in. They were much more focused on what was happening on the field and the game model and all these other things. And so I had to kind of learn how to show value in some of those areas, and kind of, especially with the head fitness coach who oversaw a lot, kind of have conversations and figure out, what do you value? What are your motivations? What are you used to? Well, how, like what we are trying to do or what I'm trying to do, how can we blend this so that it fits within the model that you want, but also we're achieving the things that we know we need to achieve, in the gym, on the field, et cetera. And so that was a good learning lesson, I think, because most places I've been before, were pretty open to everything that we do on the performance side. And so it was frustrating at first, but I think overall, I think it was a really good lesson for myself. And I think most of us in the high performance department, between the medical and performance staff. And we eventually were able to kind of get things going with the gym, and the physical data. And luckily we have a lot of players who have been in the league, who are used to a lot of those things. And so they would come and ask us for stuff or ask questions, or, just trying to educate them along with the coaches on the reasoning why, and maybe some preconceived notions that they might have had for it not necessarily helping. And, I think it was a good process overall.
Well, that's interesting, because I was thinking, just out of ignorance, was that the head coach and the GM were getting together and creating a team, when in fact there were different elements that were pooling the professionals together, all, without knowing necessarily each other. So this is quite a situation. We're talking about some really complex ways of team building, and we're not talking about the players themselves
Yep.
as the support staff that are there for the players. So wow, Adam, that's a lot, man. Now, the way in which you kind of lay this out, how was it? How did it come together, or has it come together where there are a lot of points of conflict that you really needed to have to mediate, or what was it like?
Yeah, I think, without getting too into the details, there were some power dynamics. There were some points of conflict between people. Just different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of us in this industry, for better or worse, have some egos attached to what we do. And so not wanting to admit that there could be a different perspective or a different way to look at things, or that maybe the things that certain people have done for a while are not necessarily the best, or that there are different athletes, whatever it is. I think I had a pretty good relationship with the head fitness coach, who the head coach had kind of wanted to oversee most of the things with the first team. But the club had brought in other people, including myself and my boss, to kind of oversee a lot of things. So that was a little bit of a conflict between some people. And ultimately, I think the coaching staff wanted to go one way and the club wanted to go another way. And so the head coach and his coaching staff were let go at about 5 months into the season or so, 4 or 5 months. And that's obviously public knowledge. And I think it was for a lot of different reasons, but for us, for our staff, on the performance side, the medical side as well, it was a perfect kind of shot in the arm for our staff, because we had been doing a lot of things and putting a lot of procedures in place to, try and make the best of a situation, and really make a lot of progress with the players when we were allowed to, or within the game model system that the coaches had wanted. And so once the head coach was let go, and one of our assistants was brought on as the interim head coach, and he's now been named our official head coach. We were able to kind of have more freedom. He had been in Major League Soccer before, and he's coached at some high level places, and he very much values what we do, and knows it's a very important part of the development process and playing. And so he really empowered us to, I want you to do what you were brought in to do. All the different things, I'm not going to come and ask you about a lot of stuff, but I want you to filter up the necessary information from the physical data, what they're doing, up to him and the rest of his coaching staff, so that they know what's going on and they know if there are any issues or anything like that. But he was great in just being able to say, you know what, you guys go ahead and really take this and run with it, because you all know what you're doing, and you're professionals. And that empowered us to really say, okay, like, we've been making a lot of ground with a lot of the players, and now they already see us and respect the positions that we have, because we've been doing a lot of things in the background that a lot of people didn't see, so they know that we've been putting in the work and educating them and having discussions with players on, this is why we do this, this is why we do this, this is why you should do this, this is how this helps, and having them kind of see that slowly and chip away at it. And then once we were kind of put in the position of being able to do what we were brought in to do, we kind of just took it and ran with it. And it was pretty amazing to see our staff kind of come together and really take that on and really go for it. And we had a great run of form towards the end of the year. We were in the playoff race up until the last week. That was really exciting for all of us, because a lot of people had written us off. And I think it was a validation for not only us, but also for the coaching staff, that, like, a lot of us, what we've been putting in place as a staff, especially them, with what they were doing tactically and from a physical standpoint, was really having an effect. And it was really fun to see us kind of go on this run and see the buy-in. The players started getting more and more and more to see, like, okay, what we're doing is really, really working. And I think it just served as a good foundation and a jumping off point for us now to really, from day one of preseason this coming year in January, which is, I think it's like, I don't know, 7-8 weeks away. We're now having these discussions of what do we want to do from day one to kind of set the tone, and also, like, help build on the culture that we were able to build a little bit in the last 4 months of the year, and really grab it and kind of elevate the culture here from a physical side. And so that was a lot of fun, and it was another challenge, but it was a really, really fun thing to experience, especially being an expansion team that, again, like I said, as staff, most of us didn't know each other, hadn't really met or anything, but especially with the players, for the most part, none of them knew us, so it was really great to see everybody buy in.
Yeah, honestly, you cannot underscore the word complexity here enough. Not only are normally you think of a sports team and they have a change in the office personnel, whether it's the coaching, the GM, or whatever, but the players relatively stay the same and get traded here and there, but there's a core group. But that wasn't the case with you. You were building everything from scratch, not only the coaching, the training staff, the medical staff, all the way down to the players themselves. So that's remarkable that you guys actually got toward the middle of the pack, or almost toward the playoffs. Meanwhile, my team with the Earthquakes, we finished proudly in the basement. I mean, we should be going down to the next level. It was such a poor out show. But how about this? You had tools, you had things in Minnesota that were working well for you, and you took them down to Carolina, to Charlotte. What did you find continued to work well? What were you willing to kind of say, going to put that off on the shelf there for the time being, and we're actually going to pull these new things down? How did that work out for you when you're going into Charlotte?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question, because, as you say, staff-wise, obviously it's a brand new staff and brand new club, but 30 brand new players, most of whom have never even played with each other. Some of them might have played in the same leagues. Maybe one or two of them have played on the same team in the past, here and there. But you come in at the beginning of the preseason and everyone is a stranger, and so how do we help foster the kind of dynamics where we have group dynamics where these guys are going to want to play with each other, and play for each other on the field? And I think I would be lying if I didn't say, hey, going down there, in my head, I'm thinking like all these grandiose plans of this is how we're going to help build, culture, and these are the things that we can do. And I think all of us would have that, right? Certain things that we would want to do if we were able to do it our way. And then getting down there, like I said, being confronted with a coaching staff that thought a lot differently. It was more, okay, well, what are the little things that we can do to start putting into practice with the players that are going to pay dividends, down the line. And so, for us, and especially for myself on the performance side, I was wanting to get into the gym and lift properly, but with performance in mind, and all, like, not just injury prevention and not just lifting to lift, but with specific things in mind, based on injury history, based on position group, based on the demands of their position and what they do in a game, and the type of player they are within the game model. And so it was kind of, for me, that was an easy thing to start to chip away at and start to convince the head fitness coach and the staff. This is why these will pay dividends, because we all know, generally speaking, from a lot of research, teams that finish towards the top of the table in a lot of the leagues are the ones that have, a lot of the least amount of their best players, that have been injured, right? They have availability for their best players more so than a lot of the other teams. So what are some of the things that we can do to keep them available? Well, we can keep them strong. We can, work on injury prevention. We can keep them powerful. We can keep them, eating healthy, hopefully sleeping, like looking at hydration, so all of these things that are, I want to say, like low-hanging fruits, those were some of the things that we kind of wanted to try and knock off first to just get people in the habit, because we had a lot of players who had not been at clubs that had some of the resources that you have in Major League Soccer or that we have at Charlotte FC. And so they haven't been exposed or experienced some of the things, like whether it is a proper weight room or whether it is an actual team dietitian or, certain things for hydration or specific, supplementation, like all these different things that, sometimes we take for granted because we're in environments where it's just kind of, pretty common. Some players are not used to that at all. And so what can we do? Educate them, and then just, have them start doing things a little bit more professionally, a little bit better day after day after day. And then a few months in, it just becomes a habit. And then we can go to the next thing, like, okay, now that we have you eating right and, lifting and you're strong and we're working on stuff on the field and we're looking at the metrics so that you're hitting the things that we want, so that you're getting high speed running, sprinting, etc. What's the next thing that we can do, like one level deeper, And so what can we look at from your subjective wellness when you're doing that, or when we're doing, readiness testing, if we're doing jump testing or, ISO testing or anything like that, and we see things, okay, why are we seeing them? Asking questions, have, the athletic trainers go and see them and evaluate them, do something and then retest if we can. And how do we modify what they're doing on the field? And so it's just little things that they see the 2 or 3 things we started with, start to work well and start to help them. So that builds a little buy-in. And now it's like, okay, it's easier to get them to do the next level deeper things that are a little bit more tough. And then when they see that helping, if they're staying healthy, and playing well, then what are the things we can do one level deeper from there? And then it builds, day after day, week after week, month after month, player after player. And eventually more and more we're able to get a lot of buy-in and get a lot of the players to understand what we were doing and why it was important. And then, we can establish the big rocks and work on those. And as we develop as a club, we can start adding, little rocks here and there, or little, specific things for people, individualization and whatnot, so that we start having, a holistic, individualized, program for everyone, that we're getting all of the players to really see what kind of effect it can have, but then also, that we're doing it out of wanting them to be great.
Well, we're going to take a little break in the action right now to tell you about a course that I'll be teaching at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute this January 21st, 2023. It's all about anatomy and motion, understanding what happens when the foot strikes the ground all the way through the chain, at least for the lower body closed chain biomechanics. And this is a game changer. Once you understand how joints move, then you can get a better understanding of how muscles react to those joint motions. And when it comes to program design for athletic trainers, physical therapists, strength coaches, and the like, even manual therapists, this is information you want to know. So you can go to rockysnyder.com and check in with courses and workshops. Click there and it'll lead you where you can register for this one-day event. Again, Perform Better in West Warwick, Rhode Island. Hope to see you there. So I'm curious, I want to talk, I mean, you mentioned so many things. I would love to talk about the lift selection based on position groups as well as injuries. So I'm going to come back to that, but I'm curious before you even talk about that, what's the size of your staff? How many athletic trainers, performance specialists, strength coaches, physical therapists? What are we talking for a team of 30?
So on staff, so after initially when we started, so my boss who brought me here he's the director of performance sports science. So like I said, he kind of oversees medical and performance. And then I was the only performance coach on staff. And so we had the head fitness coach that the head coach had brought in. And he kind of said, hey, this guy is going to basically run everything for the first team, do everything he says. And so he handled most of the on-field stuff. So the warm-ups, on-field fitness and kind of sat in and helped plan training with the coaching staff. But then, like I said, I saw all of the strength programming and then all of the testing that we do for readiness and performance on a weekly basis, along with the GPS data and some of the other stuff, wellness subjective and whatnot, and kind of creating reports. And then we have a head athletic trainer and then 2 assistant athletic trainers. So it was really kind of a team of 6 of us. And then we have a team dietitian as well, who falls under that banner as well. But it was really 6 or 7 of us. And then once the head coach and been let go, I basically assumed all of his abilities as well, also doing all the on-field stuff. So it was not only all the strength programming, but along with that, I forgot to mention like the strength programming for injured athletes, like rehabbing in the gym. And then on top of that, all of the warm-ups on field, all of the on-field fitness, looking at the GPS data like live during training to make sure we're hitting specific targets, or if guys can do top-offs and whatnot. And on top, along with that, after the fact, all of the management, collection, analysis, interpretation, and reporting of that data to my boss, who was kind of embedded with the coaches. And he was in there working with them, kind of helping plan training sessions. And then I was there to help kind of execute them when we were on the field. So my responsibilities grew. And I think we talked about last time, luckily for me, my 2 years with Minnesota, and then the year before that, when I was in Reno at the USL, like I had to do all of those positions kind of by myself at various times. And so I was kind of used to it and it didn't faze me. And some people, would, when I tell them that, laugh and it's like, I can't believe you do things all at once. Those are 3 different positions, like full time. But it was something that I've done, and I've done well enough to, get where I am. And I think that we've been able to do a lot of good things and make some actionable decisions from it. But luckily, after I want to say 2.5 months, we were able to bring on an assistant performance specialist for me. And we were able to bring him in, somebody I've known for a little while and kind of talked with here and there. And he was a great candidate and was willing to come mid-season. And I was able to kind of give him a lot of the delivery of the gym sessions, and then also have him take over all of the performance and readiness testing, so that was kind of off my plate a little bit. I'm still overseeing a lot of it, but he is the one actually delivering and doing the day-to-day. And so that way I can, still focus a lot on the on-field stuff, the data, and the overarching, plan from a gym perspective and injury prevention, but I don't have to be in 3 places at once, which is nice. And then it also allows me to start focusing on some of the, higher level questions and projects that we are starting to think about and develop here at Charlotte FC, looking long term, like I said, as a club, not just in the short term or the short lens of just the first team, but I think I'd mentioned recently as putting together some stuff as far as a performance department for the entire club, and how do we link players from U12s all the way to the first team on the performance pathway, and kind of getting the chance to build that, because we're a brand new club and so it's never existed. So how do we do that, and asking those questions and and starting those projects with some of the performance coaches at the reserve team and the academy and whatnot. And so I know there are staffs in the league that are much bigger, and I know that there are some that are smaller because I've been part of them. So I think, we could always use another person, a body or two to help. But I think what we have a great collection of people, especially now that we're entrenched with what we're doing and we have the coach's support. I think I would like to rival our staff against a lot of in the league, and just say that we have a lot of great experience, a lot of great minds and different perspectives, and challenge each other. And I think it's a great place to be, regardless of whether we have 6 people, 10 people, or 3 people. I think it's been a wonderful place.
Well, and you've got the owner to have a track record with also. I mean, Carolina Panthers owner, then when they became an expansion team, it didn't take them long to make it all the way to the Super Bowl, and they've been there more than one time now. And so you're playing in the same stadium. You got that backdrop behind you that shows, I think you told me it was a sellout crowd. How many people were in attendance for your very first game?
Yeah, it was almost 75,000 people for our very first home game this year, which set the MLS record for attendance. It was incredible. I mean, I think we were talking offline, like just walking onto that field, for the before the game, as I was walking over to the benches and just looking around, and the noise and the buzz, and it was awe-inspiring that, there's 75,000 people here for a game for a team that I'm working with in Major League Soccer. You know what I mean? Like, I've been to big games in Europe, and obviously, I've been to the World Cup, and I've been to other big sporting events as far as college football and things like that. But just to see how much it's grown from when I was a kid, when I was a kid, MLS wasn't even around. I think I was 10 or so when it was first founded. So it was a really, really fun thing to be part of. And also, I think we were talking about, like, just how much this city has embraced this club has been incredible. I mean, I see people wearing our jerseys, our shirts, our kit, like everywhere, all over the city at all times. Like, even though our season's done now, they still, I see people out wearing them all the time. And I think we had the second most jerseys sold. We had like the second or third highest attendance in the league, for the whole season, like even discounting that first game. I mean, it's really been a breath of fresh air, and it's really surprised me at how great, like, the fan reception has been, and how much excitement there has been in this city. And so I think, like you said, with the owner, and just in general with the building blocks that I know we're putting into place, we talked about, we're opening a new facility in the spring, and so that's going to be a part of that, and building the gym with that. But there's good things that this club has almost limitless potential for what it could be, and it's an exciting thing to be a part of. Regardless of if it was tough at the beginning, it I think was a good learning lesson for all of us to really know, like, what do we value and how are we going to build this club going forward. And I'm excited for where we're going from here on out.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. So, of course, being a gym rat, more or less, just lifting heavy stuff, putting it back down repetitively over time, you brought up lifts in the gym, and positional groups, as well as position groups, and injury. I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper. Just the top 3 injuries that you are addressing with Charlotte FC, what would those be?
Yeah, I mean, the top 2 injuries in general, like, without a doubt, the number 1 is hamstring strain, like, by a large margin. Number 2 is adductor strain. And then, we like to address things within, whether it's quadriceps or calf, based on a lot of those. I mean, for soft tissues, obviously, if you have impact injuries, you'll see some ACLs at times, and hip stuff. But for us, the 2 main ones that we really, really focus on are hamstring and adductor, because they are much higher than a lot of other things. And so we do a lot of stuff as far as whether it's pre-training, prehab, like pre-training activation, basically, doing that based off of movement screens, and also the testing that we do, as far as we do isometric testing, once a week for adduction, abduction on the force frame, previously known as the groin bar. And then also we do iso hamstring testing once a week as well, just to get the hamstring test. And basically we have we look at that to see where all of our guys are at. If they not only are they within the range we want them to know that they're ready to perform and train that day, or we need to modify them or we need to address something, but also to look at longitudinally over time, like is somebody getting weaker and weaker progressively, and how do we address those things, and then put that not only in the pre-training exercises that they're doing, but then also, if we need to do some heavier strengthening, like making sure that we add some of those things into their gym sessions. So those are a couple of things from the injury, injury reduction, basically, or injury risk reduction. From a lifting standpoint, I think, like you mentioned, this is just something that I've always done, and then I know I've met a lot of people who do things differently. It's just, for me, it's always made sense is to group players based on position, especially when I'm like a one-man band, right? Obviously, if we have a bunch of strength coaches, and we can have them in groups looking at people differently, then you can individualize it even more. I haven't had that luxury in the past, so I've had to kind of do what I can to individualize as best as I can. And so I'll just group guys based on position. And for me, it makes the most sense to have, goalkeepers and center backs have similar gym sessions. Obviously, the goalkeepers are going to have a little more as far as the upper body, some of the mobility and some of the other things that they have to do because they're a unique position. But those two positions on the field do the most jumping generally, right? So a lot of times I'm going to have them do a little bit more jumping, landing mechanics and loaded jumps and things like that are going to help with that. Whereas, our center midfielders, a lot of times, they are not necessarily doing a ton of high speed running or sprinting in a game, but they usually have the highest work capacity. They usually cover the most distance, and they're normally going, right, left, forward, back, kind of within a certain range most of the game. That's where they live, right? So it's a lot more, how can we increase our work capacity, but then how can we do a lot more multi-directional stuff? What can we do so that we're addressing, all of the planes of motion, but we might be doing a little bit extra, in the frontal plane, transverse, whatnot, for those players, because they are constantly shifting around all throughout the game. Versus our wingers or the sprint the most, because you get up and down the sidelines, so much. And so they're, generally speaking, from depending on what type of system or formation you're playing, but in the modern game, for fullbacks and wingers, if they're getting up and down, like, they're going to have the most high speed running and sprinting. So with them, I want to work a lot more on running mechanics, right? So what are the type of things that we can do, and a lot more hamstring, type of stuff, because again, they're being exposed to the higher speeds. They're having a lot more sprint exposure than a central midfielder. So I want to make sure that we are almost bulletproofing their hamstring even more, because they're going to be asked to do more with that throughout the game. On top of what the lift might be for that group or that position group, then if they require anything that's individualized because of their previous injury history, then we'll add that on at the end of that lift as well, or sprinkle it into the lift, or, like I said, address it within the prehab or pre-training that they do before we head to the field. So that's kind of how I've always done it. It's worked well. I'm not saying it's the best thing that you could be doing. I'm sure there's people out there that do things differently, and it works well for them. But in the environments I've been in, it has served me well. And I think a lot of the players, when I explain it to them, when they're like, why am I not doing the same thing that he's doing? And I explain, well, on the pitch, you're not doing the same thing because you guys play two completely different positions, right? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, look at the numbers, what we're doing. When we look at our daily training reports and you see that you have twice the amount of sprinting as he does, well, it's because of the position you're playing. You're doing this and he's doing, light bulb kind of goes off, and they're like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. And then you build another level of or another layer of buy-in, and so I think that's how we've done it in the past, and I think that's how we'll continue to do it moving forward. And anybody who's listening to this, feel free to steal it, because it's not rocket science. It's just something I always thought made sense, and it's worked well.
And so you mentioned buy-in on several occasions, and I'm all for it. It's a big part of my coaching as well, where you're always explaining the reasons why you're doing what you're doing. And so anecdotally, can you give me another example or two as to building this new team with players you've never worked with, and having them realize that this is the guy that's going to help me get to the next level? How do you create that level of trust and that level of buy-in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was one that I was always kind of had in my mind as I was coming down here is, how am I going to establish a relationship with 30 new players and try and get them to buy in, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And, there's all sorts of stuff out there, obviously. I love Brett Bartholomew, and I've had the privilege of working alongside him in the past, and his conscious coaching and art coaching, and there's a lot of good stuff. But it's difficult when there's 30 people, right? That you all have to meet and get them to trust you right away. So for me, it was more, as I said before, the beginning of preseason, you're basically on the road for 6 to 8 weeks, right? You have a few days in market here or there, but you're in hotels, you're eating together, you don't have a lot of downtime where you can actually go and do city that you're in, because you are doing two-a-days and you have gym sessions and all sorts of stuff. So I basically took that, and I like to take that as an opportunity to reach out to all the players and schedule kind of initial one-on-ones with them, just so that they know who I am, but also more so I can get to know them, and just have general conversations, personal stuff like, where have you played in the past? What have you done? And try and get some of their motivations. Are they motivated by, I need a new contract this year, or I'm trying to, you know, use this as a leap to the level in Europe, whatever that is, but also um, trying to find things from their past experiences that I can kind of build upon. So a lot of times I'll just, find common links, but also say, what have you done in the past in the gym or on the field? What do you like to do? What do you not like to do? Because I think that goes a really long way. And it's really simple, but I think a lot of people, we get so stuck in doing the needs analysis for the position and for the sport, and like, this is what this demands. But if I go in there and a guy, I want a guy to be really trap bar deadlifting, but he has learned how to do a normal deadlift, from the floor, and loves doing that and wants to do that like on a regular basis. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I don't want you to do that because I prefer this. If that's something that a guy loves to do, I want him to keep doing it. I want to make sure he's doing it safely and effectively, obviously. And I'm going to kind of help program when he should be doing it. But I'm not going to say you can't be doing that, unless it's something that's going to be, really, put somebody at risk, right? If it's something way outside the box. But usually I'll try and find ways to kind of sprinkle in things that people tell me they like, even if it's not something that would be normally part of my program, but to keep them engaged, especially initially, and then start having conversations with, I know you love this, but I really like this. Do you want to try this? This is why I think this might benefit you. And, whether it's in lifting or on the field or anything like that, I think just explaining why you think they would benefit them, not just, I want you to do this, but having the conversation and explaining why, especially if you know their motivations, right? You know, like I've worked in the past, had a player who was in a contract year, and he was really, really wanted to get a new contract, and he hadn't been healthy for several seasons. And, we had this conversation, and he just said, like, I'm willing to work as hard as I need to in the gym and on the field, if you can help me, stay on the field this, the majority of the season, so that I can play and I can perform. Because when I'm on the field, I perform, and I want a new contract. And I know if I'm on the field for the majority of the games, like, I'm going to help this team and I'm going to achieve that. I said, great, okay, that works for me. You're willing to put in the work. I'm willing to put in the work on my end to program out, everything that I want you to do in the gym. But also, when I come to you on those days after training, when you are ready to go in and you feel gassed, and I say, I need you to do an extra 2 runs for me, because I need you to hit this and I need you to hit that. We have to agree right now that you're willing to do that, right? And he was just like, yeah, that's fine. I totally understand it. And I was able to work with him throughout the entire year. And he wound up staying healthy, pretty much the whole season for the most part, and played really, really well, and got, a big contract. He went to a different team, but, looking back on that, it was one of the things I was most proud of, because it's like, hey, like, he came and told me exactly what he wanted, right? And I was able to use that to help benefit him to get what he wanted, but that also enabled me to, have him do what I felt like he needed to be doing as well. And so I think, for me, over time, I've just learned to really try and have conversations with a lot of players as much as possible, as early as possible, about whatever, right? It doesn't always have to be about performance or about soccer or anything like that. I'll have conversations. The guys joke all the time, because these players are so young nowadays. Like they don't know any of the like old school hip hop, and I'll play that, when we're in the gym sometimes, and they're like, who is this? And like, how do you not know who this is? So we'll banter back and forth about that, so things like that, like finding common ground there, or, I've had previous players in the past who, we love to talk about like TV shows, right? And it's just like, did you watch the episode of that last night? Oh yeah, that was crazy, and just, again, because we're all humans at the end of the day, and so you want to find that connection, but the more that you're able to connect with them on certain things, the more that they trust you, and the relationship starts to evolve. And it's easier to say, hey, I need you to do this, but you know me, and you know that it's because it's going to help you, right? I'm never going to come at you and tell you to do something to punish you, right? Like that's not who I am. I'm here to help you. And so what I'll do when I'm asking those players in those initial conversations is, what do you like? What do you not like? And then I always kind of leave it open-ended and say, the real question is, how can I help you? What is it that you want from me that I can help you, weekly, monthly, for this year, whatever it is. And I'll say, think about that. Let me know tomorrow at breakfast, and I'll write it down. And so that way they're pondering it, but they're actually thinking about it. It's not just on the spot. And the next day, if they come to me and say, hey, I really want X, Y, and Z this year. And I'm like, great, okay, X and Y, 100% achievable. Z is going to be a lot of hard work, but if you're willing to do it, I'll put in the time for you. And again, they know that, hey, this guy's here for me. He's not here for his own self-interest. And he's also not someone that the coaches are getting to like report on me. You know what I mean? Because I think I've had a lot of players in the past, and some of them are from, I've played in different leagues across the world and whatnot, where they view the performance of the sports science staff as almost like being the ones that are telling coaches that certain guys should train or should play or should do this or shouldn't do that. Oh yeah, the guys went out last night, things like that. And they've come to me and told me those stories. And I'm just like, that's not who I am. I'm here for you. I'm here for the club. Like I want us all to win. Right.
You're not the spy. I get it.
Yeah.
But what about this though, Adam? What about your metrics, your assessments? They don't necessarily lie. They're going to tell you straight out that this person is on the verge of overtraining. Their numbers are down. Their ISO tests are low, and yet they're coming in and maybe it's their contract here, maybe it's an ego, maybe it's just their athletic desire not to slow down or give up. What do you do with those athletes as they're training with you and you're going, hey, you know what? Today's going to be an easy day. And they're like, oh, no. Does that happen?
Yeah. So I think a few players come to mind when you say that. And I think for me, it all goes back to those initial conversations when you're getting to know them, right? And what are your motivations, but also what do you like to do, right? Because I've had players come to me and say, hey, listen, I love being in the gym. Like I want to be in the gym 5 days a week. Like that's when my body feels good. And going into a match, like I need it to be, feeling like that. Okay, no problem. But I'm going to adjust the gym program. So maybe it's more a micro dosing, type of effect, right? It's not 5 super hard training sessions because, that's going to crush this guy, especially if we see his numbers coming down. It's more, how do I work within what they like, right? Because again, I'm here to serve them. And then along with that, it's more when you're getting to know these guys and talking to them and they know and trust you that like you have their best interest in mind. When I go to them and say, hey, I really need you to take tomorrow. Like I know tomorrow's an off day and you don't like to have an off day and you normally come in here or you do something at your own home gym. I need you to take tomorrow off. And here's why, right? And maybe show them a couple of numbers and say, hey, like these couple of things have been going down over the past couple of weeks. I know like you've been complaining about this little, nagging thing or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that they're necessarily related, but I think maybe a day off might do you some good, right? And then explain in more detail, why, and then maybe what they should do instead, right? If they still like, I need to do something, perfect. If you want to do something, how about yoga? I can send you a 20-minute yoga flow, that'll be great. It'll be great recovery for you. And then after that, you can go ahead and jump on the bike and do a 20 to 30 minute, easy recovery flush, right? You're going to get your body moving, but there's no grounding and pounding and you're not going to be, throwing around a bunch of weight because like, your body is kind of telling us that you might need a day or two to just recover. Right. And so again, sometimes doesn't work because, these guys are human as well and they have motivations and sometimes they're just going to do what they're going to do. But I think for me, the best advice and kind of the way that I would go about it is just kind of, again, having that relationship and discussion with them, and really trying to educate them on why. I'm not just saying like, hey, I don't want you to come in because I don't want to work. Like, yeah, I would like to have an off day too, but also, this is why I think you should do this, or this is why I think you should do that. Or if we're seeing a lot of the tests going down and things like that, as a staff, a lot of times we'll look at things and maybe it's hey, it might be a good idea to kind of limit this player for the next tomorrow's super heavy, and we're doing 11v11. We're going to do 2 bouts of it at 10 minutes or whatever on top of all the other stuff that we're running. It's a really heavy day. We normally get 7K and 400 high speed and the 150 sprint, whatever it is. But if we take them out of the 11v11 and just do some stuff on the side, that's going to decrease and put them at less risk in the chaos of an 11v11 game where we can't control if he's going to have a random recovery run that he has to do 70 yards back, at a full sprint. Maybe we can modify it. Can we look with change, talk to the coaches, see if we can modify. And so that's where my boss is really good at kind of taking that information to the coaching staff and saying, here's what we're seeing. Here's what we're thinking. Like, is this doable? Would that still work with what you guys want to do tactically, et cetera? And so I think not just talking to the player and trying to get them to do it, but also, going the other route as far as having a discussion amongst ourselves and then, coming to an agreement of what we think should be done, and then allowing that to be taken to the coaches and see what their thoughts are and if it would work, because they also understand, hey, we have their best interests because we want to win the games too, at our level.
Totally.
It's results are king, right? You could run the best performance program known to man, right? But if you lose every game, people are going to lose their jobs eventually. Like, that's just the way it is, right? So if we're going to them and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing, we might need to pull, modify it, or this person might need to be out of this drill, et cetera, then a lot of times they're like, okay, we know that you guys are coming to us because this is really important. Like, let's see if we can work around it, or
Totally.
maybe it's, what, in the gym today, I'm just going to limit you, we're going to decrease your volume. Everyone else is doing, 3 sets of 6 on these 5 exercises during this first block. I just want you doing 2 sets and you're going to do 3 to 4 in each one, and I want you to lower the load a little bit than you normally would. You're still going to be doing it. You're still going to feel it, but we're just going to decrease that load just a tad, see if that helps you out for tomorrow, because tomorrow's an off day and we want you to feel good, feel recovered when you come in Friday because Saturday's a big game, things like that. So,
oh yeah. Adam, what about this? You said you laid down all, I'm going to call them the big stones, the foundational pieces for building this club in its first year and from scratch. And now you've taken a lot of those hats that you've been wearing and handing them over to some others. So you still have tremendous amounts of responsibility on your shoulders, but we're gearing up toward January. We're getting the preseason kind of getting closer and closer.
Yep.
What are the less bigger blocks, but the ones that are going to fill in the space? Where are you going in this upcoming season? What do you focus on preparing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, as a high performance department, both the medical side and the performance, we've been having a lot of these discussions because we weren't able to have a lot of these right before preseason last year, and then with the coaching change and everything, it was kind of we're going to do the things that we know we're doing really well, and then focus on the other things where we can. And now we have the opportunity to kind of build, and we're discussing what do we want to focus on, what are our big rocks, but then what are the medium or small rocks. And I think from my side, it's a lot of it is just, how do we from day one of preseason establish this is the culture, this is what is expected of you from the performance side and from our department, but educating them on, here's what we're going to do and here's why, right? So getting in front of the players and saying, this is what we're going to be doing in the gym. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to be like. This is what it's going to be like for the first few months, while we're in preseason, but also like out of the stadium like we have been. But then once we move in this new facility, with this brand new gym, it's going to change a little bit. So this is how it's going to look then. But this is how it's going to be, and this is why, right? Just a real quick, 10 minutes or so they understand when we're asking them to do stuff, it's not just, to do it. It's this is why. Again, like everything that you and I have been talking about, this is here to help you stay on the field and help you perform better so that you can play better and we can win games, right? And then, taking that and having that be something. And then another thing is, okay, here's the GPS. We ask you to wear this every single day and also in games. why. Here's what we're looking at. When we actually print out these reports and everything, this is why we're looking at these things. This is the importance of it. And again, just educating them on the reasoning why, because a lot of them have been at different clubs where they just have you wear it, but they have never been told why or what the things that they should be looking at are, right? Obviously, they're not going to get as granular as we're getting, but again, just educating, this is why we're doing it. This is what we're looking at, and this is what you should be noting. Take that. That's a big rock. Set that aside. Here's what we're going to be doing from a testing standpoint. This is why we test. We do these tests on these days because they correlate with what you're going to be doing in training. We want to test and make sure that you're ready, or if we're doing it during a gym session, we're testing it from a performance standpoint because we use that to help program what you're doing in the gym, what we talked about over here, and explaining this is why we're doing these things. This is what you'll be doing, certain days of the week, and this is how it works. Boom, big rock, set that over here. From a nutrition standpoint, our team dietitian is great. She's coming up with a lot of different things that she wants to talk about. Like, here are the big rocks as far as what you need to know nutritionally, from a fueling standpoint, from a hydration standpoint, also from, before you go to bed and sleep and whatnot. These are the things you need to know. And then you can come to her for, further one-on-one discussions. Big rocks, set that over here, and just on and on and on, from that standpoint, even something as easy as like, this is why we collect wellness in the mornings. This is the purpose for it. Little things like that that are within big rocks, but are something that can be explained. But kind of taking each of those, putting them together and saying, here are the things we're going to focus on doing really, really well. And then there are a lot of little things that can kind of be part of it, or they can be kind of subsidiary, I guess, or off to the side, even from breaking it out from a gym standpoint and talking about, injury prevention, certain exercises, this is why we're doing this, is why we're doing that. But then even talking about, pre-training, this is what we're going to do. This is what it's going to look like. We're going to have a movement prep session where on this day, it's a short and small day with a lot of, small sided games. So there's a lot of XLs, decels, changes of direction, not a lot of high speed running and sprinting. So your pre-training exercises are going to look like this, multi-directional, and we're looking at these things, whether it's crossover, shuffle, etc., like, all the different stuff from pillar prep and everything. 10 minutes, you're going to be doing these 5 or 6 things. Then when we get out on the field, the warm up on the field is going to continue that. And it's going to be, basically a continuation of that, but also we're going to start building in what the coaches want, right? So if the coaches like to press, right? Okay, well, we're going with a multi-directional because it's a small sided day. So how can we incorporate pressing into the warm up that I'm doing, and not just have you change directions, but have you change direction hard and get back, or, you have to press somebody and then I call out a different color for you to press over that, incorporating those things, and then maybe even at times incorporating the ball because the players always like the ball, right? But not incorporating the ball and having the warm up suffer as a result. It's how do you incorporate it along with it and still get the most out of it, right? So you're pressing, come back, play a 1-2, and then you have to accelerate and press through these sticks to get to the next person. And the coach is seeing that and being like, great, like this is, already putting in some of the principles that we're going to go into in the next, thing. And then, then they see, okay, in the gym, this is why we're doing these things in the gym that day after training. We're not doing any of the posterior chain stuff because the next day is going to be the big day where you sprint. So we don't want you to come in and be super sore in your hamstrings on the day that we're expecting you to get 100 to 150, 200 meters of high speed running and sprinting, or however much, And then once we start to put it all together, this is what you can expect on a daily basis. It's like, oh, wow, now I understand how this all builds one layer on top of the next, on top of the next, on top of the next, but it's all the same big rocks. And it just, builds it out to be day after day, week after week over the course of a season. And the players start to understand that, like, okay, they know what they're doing. They have our interest at heart. Again, because it's like from the beginning, I'm going and telling them, I want you to stay on the field and I want you to have the best year you can possibly have. You do well, we do well, right? The team does well, everyone does well. Like that's all that we want, and I think by explaining those things, educating them, but then also having them see them day after day and having the little side conversations here and there and talking about it, again, you start to just build that buy-in, and eventually, hopefully the majority of the team, especially like the leaders and the ones that are, respected in the locker room, are really kind of, bought in and want to be part of it and understand and are seeing results. And it's like, great, and then that that train is rolling, and there's no coming back. It's already
Uh,
on the tracks and it's going down. So it almost just continues to build on top of itself.
Well, you are building it. I mean, and honestly, you and the rest of the crew around you, not to mention the players, of course, but I mean, to go from nowhere, know how, nothing, and to make it almost to the playoffs. If you guys continue this, you'll be going against LAFC in the finals next year. I can see it now. So, Adam, this has been flying by. I can't believe an hour's already gone
Yeah.
by. I can't thank you enough. It's really cool to catch up with you again and to get that experience that you shared about moving from Minnesota to Charlotte and the great machine that you're continuing to build. So I just want to thank you for coming on and wish you luck and the next season coming up. And maybe are you going to enjoy a little bit of downtime yourself? Is there like 2 days that they give you off?
Yeah, actually, I just got married 2.5 weeks ago, so I'm gonna be going on my honeymoon here in about 2.5, 3 weeks,
Oh
and
man.
I'm planning on just sitting on a beach in St. Lucia and doing absolutely nothing. No Wi-Fi, just taking the week off and really enjoying my time. So that'll be fun.
It sounds well deserved, my friend. That's great. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for the Zealous Podcast. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Adam Parr and Charlotte FC, for agreeing to come on and kind of just touch base with what's been going on, building a club from nowhere. It looks like the Carolinas are the hotbed for expansion teams, and they do pretty well. So I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. And do check out RockySnyder.com if you're interested in the biomechanics class, and there's more on the way in January. So not just a one day, but we've got more on the East Coast. Just go to the website, check it out. These are game changing, just like the episodes you've just listened to. Until next time, have a great week.